I just want to welcome, first of all, Outwords Archive. So excited because I think, one of the things that in our community we don't do enough of is talk about our elders. And they are the ones that paved the way for us, who helped give us the path and the journey to be here and have what we have, right? So we're very blessed to have them. And so I'm so honored that Mason Funk, the founder of Outwords Archive, and I connected. And then I don't know how we got here, but here we are. And I'm so excited and honored to have you all. So Mason, I'm going to pass the torch over to you now. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so in awe that I get to share a stage with all of you. I want to give a little more information about each one of our panelists. So Paul Outlaw is a Los Angeles and Berlin-based multidisciplinary performing artist. Paul's award-winning work confronts the social constructions of race and gender and examines the legacies of white supremacist patriarchal violence, both physical and psychological, throughout Euro-American history. Bamby Salcedo is president and CEO of the TransLatin Coalition, which advocates for and addresses the issues of transgender Latinas throughout the U.S. Bamby also developed the Center for Violence Prevention and Transgender Wellness, a multi-purpose, multi-service space for trans people here in Los Angeles. And last but not least, Mia Yamamoto is an attorney and former public defender. Her awards and honors include being appointed by the California Supreme Court to various task forces to improve our legal system, the Rainbow Key Award from the City of West Hollywood, multiple designations as Criminal Defense Attorney of the Year. Yes, that means if you did it, you want Mia. And recipient of the Harvey Milk Legacy Award. Please welcome again our panelists.
I see myself as a servant to the people. I don't believe in politics, although politics drive how our society functions. I think I can be more effective on the outside than being part of in the inside. I just don't understand why policymakers or law legislators, right, who are supposed to be servants to the people, don't understand that what needs to happen. We really need to ensure that there is recognition of who trans people are, right? But also that is coupled with and meaningful investment in the livelihood of our communities. People think that because we are in the eye of the media, that because we are in, covers of magazines, or that because we are in TV shows, that our social conditions have changed, and that's not true.
I've been coming out for the past 5 years as gender expansive, which I would not have been able to define, 10 years ago. Because I grew up in a time where we didn't have these labels or this understanding that we do now, the same way that I might have suppressed being gay for the longest time, I think my notions about my gender expression I suppressed even longer, or I diverted. And I started looking at photographs of myself in Berlin, where I'd be wearing a vest and a tie, cut-off shorts, combat boots, but then a fully made-up face and super short hair. It was always there for me, but I couldn't, I didn't have the words for it, and I also didn't know what it was. This is something that I want to be in my life and not just in my work. So for the past 5 years, living here in LA, I've been putting on makeup when I want to, not just for performance, and not also to make myself look younger, but to make myself look like myself.
The organizing I've done has always been coalition organizing. And understanding the interests of other people and trying to put yourself in their shoes and having some understanding of the life that a person lives that brings them to this point of view. Once we can do that on a large scale, I believe that we can do things together that can actually benefit all of us and benefit the larger society, which again, I say is the entire objective, is to move all of us forward in some way. At a time like this, when everybody's rights are under siege, when we're being threatened and we're being attacked by our own government, then I think we need each other more than ever. In the long run, justice for everyone can only be achieved by coalition. It's really the same thing with respect to all of our communities. When we talk about racism and that type of thing, we have to deal with that in addition to transphobia, homophobia. It has got to be a part of it because it can't be allowed to continue to divide us.
So the blurb for this event mentioned the, and I'm using air quotes, less accepting world that you all navigated on your way to today. And it caused me to kind of take a pause back because that less accepting world may or may not be a thing of the past. And so I wondered, from your perspectives, having lived a goodly number of years, all of you, if there are in fact facets or aspects of a so-called less accepting world that you actually don't see around anymore, things that actually have become somewhat, maybe not permanently, maybe not completely, but less visible, less prominent, less noticeable, and less harmful. And I'm not going to ask any of you in particular, and also I just want to say, feel free to grab the mic, pass it among yourselves. Don't feel like you have to always go back to me in any way, shape, or form. Mia, it looks like you got nominated to speak first.
I think that things have changed, but I think they've gotten worse on one level. And I just want to point out the people who are election specialists that I know right now that says if the election was held today, Trump would win the election. And because of the battleground states, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and a whole bunch of others, Arizona, Nevada, where we're losing in those states. And if we lose all the way to the election, we're in deep shit because Trump is the worst threat to world peace and to civil rights and to our lives that's come into our lives in the last 20 years. He is the leader of a fascist movement. You know, it's interesting because from my point of view, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I'm watching all these World War II movies, and I'm feeling so cheated because the generation before us got to fight real Nazis. And when they sent me to Vietnam, we're fighting a group that's just trying to keep off the invaders. I felt so cheated. I wanted to be a part of the generation that fought the Nazis, and as it turns out, we're back in the same spot. The leader of the Nazis is Donald Trump and the Republican Party, and I guess that screws with people's nonprofit status. But I'll say it right now, the Republicans are the evil force in the society. We got to fight them, we got to beat them. We can't allow them to beat us in November because it's a few months off, but unfortunately they're ahead. And if you think these horrible people with their despicable values and their targeting of minority people and people who are marginalized, if they were to succeed in this election, that just says a whole lot, I think, about us and our ability to fight back and speak out and be a part of a campaign to change the political fortunes of this country. And we have to be united. And whenever I talk about that, I think there's a lot more alliances today. And that's why I always talk about coalition, because no minority movement succeeds without allies. Because, I cite Frederick Douglass all the time, but there was something he said that I thought made all the difference in the world in terms of coalition, and that was when he fought against slavery, it was for himself. When he fought against racial discrimination, it was for his people. But when he fought for the rights of women, he found some nobility there. And that is what it's all about. Fighting for justice, not just for your own little community, but for all communities. And making sure that there is no community left behind, even the most minuscule minority on the planet, transgender people. And that is why these people, these bullies, they're going to try to find the easiest targets they possibly can to succeed with their political agenda. And it starts and begins with us, and it's happening all over the country right now. And they have found a way to turn hatred and bigotry into political advantage. And let me just say this. So that, I think, is something that has risen up. Certain other things, I think anti-black racism has fallen out of favor. It's no longer in style. like it used to be, and maybe even sexism coming back into style, not with sexism per se, but with the subjugation of women and the denial of women's rights and the campaign by the right wing to turn back all of the advances of the civil rights movement, including the women's movement, and all minorities, including all racial minorities. Let me just leave it at that. I talk too much.
That question threw me because I thought, is it better, worse? I think for me, when I was coming up, this panel, this cafe, this would not have been. So this is a very positive experience for me. But when I think that every day I'm wrestling with more fears than I was in the 80s, for example, that to walk out in the street, and let's say if I wanted to walk 2 miles the way I am now, I would be afraid that something could happen to me as a black person, as a queer person, and as a gender expansive person. And what you were saying about Trump, I mean, I haven't felt this way about an election since I was a boy in 1968, when I thought Hubert Humphrey's going to win the election against Nixon, and we know what happened that summer, and that election is very similar to now. So a lot of fears and dread that I haven't had in a while or haven't had in this way are very present now than they were before, more present.
It makes me wonder, the fact that you could even envision walking down the street dressed the way you are today, but that you also feel afraid, is this part of progress? That things become possible, but then they become dangerous, and that's part of the growth journey. I just want to throw that out there, but I also want to hear what you have to say, Bamby.
Bueno, primero que nada, gracias a Dios por un día más de vida, gracias a Dios por la tierra en la cual vivimos hoy en día y gracias a Dios por la presencia y la oportunidad de estar aquí. For those of you who were not able to understand, I always acknowledge my Creator for giving me one more day to breathe. I honor the land where we're standing on today, and I also honor your beautiful and amazing presence, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share stage with this legendary and amazing, beautiful individuals. So that question, it's really, I'm going to say tricky, right? Because, again, kind of like what you're saying, right? Because I remember when I landed in LA at 18 and I started my transition, there was nothing for us, right? There was anything and everything that we would need, we would get in our own community, right? Hormones, whatever, right? And now there are, here in LA, 2 clinics, that specialize in supporting members of the trans community, right? And even then, they have a 6 to 8 month waiting list to get into care, right? And so yes, some progress, but I think with the progress that we have gained over the years, right? That's why, as Mia was saying, all this group of people are taking it away, like chipping it away, right? And the way they're doing it is by denying, our rights, right? They're attacking young people. They're attacking their parents. They are about over 500 pieces of legislation moving in about 33 states across the United States against the LGBTQ community, but about 400 of those are specifically targeting trans people, right? And as I was saying earlier, right, like some of that stuff is happening here. Like we have agitators and people who come from the outside to the school boards, right? They are, introducing policies. There's pieces of legislation moving in the state, mandating teachers and counselors to report if they think that, some young person is acting in a way that should be not acting in terms of their gender, that they should be reported, right? And that obviously it's putting people in danger. We know that when it comes to us, our own families oftentimes throw us out to the streets, right? Because the same things that we deal with as trans people, gender expansive individuals or intersex people, right? The discrimination and everything else, our parents and our loved ones also go through it, right? And so many of our parents don't want to go through that, right? Who wants to be ostracized and marginalized and oppressed and violated in different ways? So that's what happens. But I think it's also important for us to recognize that that we are resilient, right? But it's just that the institutions that we have within our society have never given us opportunities, right? And so we have fought for the little opportunities that we have right now, right? If we really look at the progress that we have made as trans, gender expansive, or intersex people, it's only been like really in the last 10 years, right? We've existed forever and we have survived many horrible experiences, but resources, this booming of trans-led organizations and groups organizing and really providing for our own community, even though we always have, right? We always have housed our own people, we always have fed our own people, clothed our own people. We, by nature, are social workers. It's just that we've never gotten the support and the resources that we needed. And so now that we're organizing to do that, that's why they are trying to chip that away. But I can say that our resilience is going to prevail, right? We're not going to let them win. But we also need all of you to stand in solidarity with all of us, to understand that all of us deserve to have opportunities and be able to thrive rather than just survive.
Yes, girl.
Paul or Mia, anything else you want to add on? Thank you all. We're actually going to come back to the topic of allyship. It's something that we at Outwords have been talking a lot about lately, allyship. But I want to switch gears a little bit. And since we're celebrating you as elders, I'm also going to ask you about the word elders in a minute. But, okay, well, I'm going to ask you about the word right now. What does that word evoke for you? Do you like if you heard the word elders in a general, like when it wasn't being applied to you, what would that word evoke for you? And then how does it feel when it's applied to you? Go, Paul.
Grandma with a big hat at church, right? Easter Sunday, or like the grandpa with the glasses and the bald head. And Sonny, give me my coffin now. That. I've been thinking about it. I was just talking to a friend yesterday, a colleague, and I was like, I'm going to be on a panel as a wise elder tomorrow. And she laughed. She just laughed in my face. And it's like, both parts, but more the wise part. And it's, I know that it's true. That's the thing. I think it is a truth, a fact, that I'm an elder in this community, because I've heard that you're an elder at age 32, which was a long time ago. So, it does give me, I think I was telling Jordan, imposter syndrome. Like, I consider myself a role model, perhaps as an artist, but as a queer elder, it's something that I'm still like, it's like this skirt, I'm still trying to make it work. Not step on it, not trip over it. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you for that question and for that reflection. I do want to say that for me personally, and I know that this is true for many members of our community, is that we don't think that we are going to live, a particular age, right? And that was certainly the truth for me, because one of the reasons is because most of us, particularly in our younger ages, and once we come to be who we are, right? We're always in survival mode, so we don't have time to think of what the future may look like, right? And so that is why the work that we do at the TransLatin Coalition is really that, right? It's really contributing to building healthy futures for transgender, non-conforming, intersex people, right? And so, I am 54 years old now. I'm gonna be 55 this year, and I don't see myself as anything, right? Like I don't see. People think like I'm an activist. I don't think I'm an activist. People think I'm an elder. I don't see myself as an elder, but I understand that I've been doing community work for almost 30 years, right? And so that, speaks in it, by itself, but I also understand that younger people, now consider me like an elder in the movement because I do have some wisdom that I can contribute, and I appreciate that. And now that I am at this particular age, I want to live as long as possible, right?
We want you to also. We want you to live as long as possible.
Yeah, I never thought that I would,
Let me just say, I'm a real elder. I'm 80 years old. And I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't feel bad about that at all. I'm actually kind of happy I survived because I spent most of my youth, like most queer people, I was vacillating between wishing I was dead and wishing I never was born. Those are my only two wishes when I was coming up. And I think if you meet a queer person who is not suicidal, you have not met a queer person because some element of their life came up at some point when they said, screw this. I would like to dump this entire thing altogether because it is so oppressive, it is so uncomfortable, and it is so out of touch with my beliefs and my life and my identity. So I embrace it, and I appreciate being able to talk to you about experiencing life into old age because I want you all to get there. I don't want anybody to be beset with the kinds of despair and the kind of self-destruction that just comes with the turf. I would like to be able to offset it and say, you know something? You can get to 80. You can get to 80 and you can still be working, you can still be contributing, you can still be loving your old lady, you can see doing the things that are important to a human being surviving in the world. And by the way, thanks for the AFC, folks. I'm Angel City, guys. I love you. Thanks for just being around and bringing the campaigns you bring. But anyways, for us, I just haven't seen them over there. But the main thing is I just want to make sure that you understand that it is glorious to survive, to get past all of the attacks, all of the discrimination, all of the targeting, to be in the spots that we're in and to continue to fight for everybody, not just for the queer community, but for all oppressed and marginalized communities everywhere. This campaign has resonance. Coming out as a queer person has incredible resonance. It liberates everybody. It liberates the world. And this world needs liberating. We're not the only ones that are experiencing oppression. That's the reason why, look at these 400 bills where they specifically are targeting us. And I look at that, and of course, it's a little bit overwhelming, but I think, you know something? Try checking out Uganda. Try checking out some places where it's just completely unsafe to even say you're a gay person or to exhibit any element of our true selves. And think about the resonance that it has to stand up here, speak our truth, defend our truth, and speak out against all the oppression, against all oppressed people. It matters. Every single individual voice matters. Surviving matters. Survive into old age. It's really important to do it, to embrace it, and to be role models in that regard for other queer kids and other people that need that kind of example, that kind of inspiration. So yeah, it's great being old. I'm sorry, My mom used to always tell me, she says, hey, don't ever get old. I said, Mom, if you're lucky, you get old. I'm going to dig it. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to live it. And I think that it's great. I think the example, the experience matters. In all things, experience matters. You've seen elements of the world. You've seen what the world can be and what other people can be like. You've seen the possibilities for your own life and how you can rise above everything that you're experiencing, everything that's coming after you and targeting you. You can rise above all of it because you have the belief in your own humanity. And and in the humanity community. All of us. Every time we speak up, you empower people in the community. You empower a kid someplace that's having trouble coming out. Yeah, it's true. I didn't even know what a cross-dresser was when I was growing up. I didn't see a word for it. You know what I mean? When I was growing up, there was no such thing as that. And you go into old age, you realize that we are a pretty tiny minority, but we're not completely alone. And all through history, there have been transgender people, and we have been there. And now we have the opportunity to speak out and make a contribution and be a part of the movement of society towards a more compassionate, a more just, a more equal society. I think that's a great opportunity, and I embrace it in my old age.
Thank you.
I embrace it.
Thank you.
I'm going to be as active as possible.
Mia tells, I want to share a little, when Mia, in her interview with Outwords, she tells the story about how the first day she went to court as herself, she said, today I'm going to go liberate the courts. Tomorrow I'm going to go liberate the jail system. And she saw herself, and with just cause, as a liberationist. And I was looking up here thinking we could say celebrating LGBTQ liberationists, because I think that is something that we all do bring, and rightly spoken. And you also teed up my next question beautifully, which is, you three, almost without a doubt, did not have queer elders or mentors growing up. But the question that I do love to ask our interviewees is, were there people, was there one person who gave you a spark of hope by their way of living, by their feistiness, by their refusal to roll over, whatever the case might be? You didn't have people that look like yourselves to lead you forward, but you might have had somebody else, and I'm curious about that from your experiences.
So I guess I'll start, and I'll try to be brief, because I know that I always, give all of this to get you here, which I think is important too, right? Because we have to understand context. But for me personally, so I was born in '69, and that was when the gay liberation movement started, right? Even though, there were different events that happened before that, but when I was growing up, and when I started my transition, right, all I saw was disparities, right, and despair in our community. Like, again, it was, trans women, other trans women were, sex workers and, drug addicts and, all of that, right? And so that was the world. So, yes, they were role models in some ways, but I didn't necessarily be part of that, but I was caught up in that, right? And so for me, what is concerning really to me is that that we are aging as particularly trans women, and there was footage of this documentary that's called The Life and Death of Marsha P. Johnson. Some of you might have seen it. And there was footage of Sylvia Rivera on the streets, being homeless and, being a drug addict, right? And that's how she died. And yet, she's now celebrated as one of the, the liberators of our movements, right? But we didn't support her when she needed us, right? And so we need to think about that, right? And what we are seeing at our organization, so we do have a program at our organization specifically supporting aging trans people. And if you're not a wealthy person in the United States, you're not going to have, especially if you live in Los Angeles or any major metropolitan city, right? Like, you won't necessarily have the resources to live a comfortable life if you don't have money, basically. And so we need to think about, like, how is it that we're going to support those individuals who, I'm going to say, like 2-3 generations who were neglected and forgotten and are still in their aging process, are also being neglected and forgotten. I hope that we can serve as role models to other younger people, as Mia is saying, but I think we also need to think about our own people who are aging at the moment.
I have two answers to that question. Because when you first asked, my first thought was no. But the truth is, my biggest role model when I was first aware of myself as a queer person was the community itself. Because this is in New York in the 70s, and just being in Greenwich Village, Christopher Street, the Piers, the East Village, seeing all of these men and women just being free, having fun on the streets, on roller skates and short shorts, nightclubs, this kind of openness, this kind of just liberation, that was my role model. That was really important to me. And I think at the same time, James Baldwin and David Bowie, who of course were not personal mentors in any way, but David Bowie from like 1970 to 1980, the way he expressed himself as an artist in his music and in his performance, and of course all of the writings of James Baldwin gave me strength, encouragement, even probably both. In fact, both of them were before I even had opened up to myself. So I think they were part of that, allowing me to see myself in their work and in their lives. Yeah.
You know, coming up as old as I am, there was hardly any real role models out there. The only people I saw were female impersonators, professional entertainers, and drag queens, and a lot of them were sex workers and that kind of a thing. I was the very first transgender trial lawyer that I can think of in the world, actually. There was never any example for me or any role model. I was a trial lawyer in the courts of Los Angeles. I came out and, like Mason said, I'm going to liberate the criminal courts building. I'm going to show them something they're never going to be able to unsee ever again, and the culture will change because of me walking into court dressed as a woman. All of that was really important to me from my mom, incredibly enough. And part of it is when my father died, my mom was liberated. And they didn't know it, but my brothers were very homophobic. Most of my family, I mean, the guys were kind of homophobic. Anyways, so my mom, unbeknownst to everybody, joined a gay band. She joined a band of gay guys because she was really a great musician. She was a singer and a player, played all kinds of instruments. And I remember coming to me saying, Mike, I'm in a band, and don't tell your brothers. They're homosexuals. I said, that's pretty cool, Mom. You know? He says, we play these parties. Don't tell your brothers whatever you do. And they never know. To this day, they have never heard this. And my mom died like 30 years ago, but I'd never told them because she definitely didn't want them to know. But she said, they're so much fun, Mike. I really like them. And we go out and we play parties, and everybody's dancing, and everybody's so interesting. You know. It really helped to have a mom who kind of understood some aspects of the way I looked at the world. And even though she knew ever since I was kind of small that I was trans, actually, because I actually brought a newspaper to her back in the 50s and said, Mom, there's this Christine Jorgensen person, and there's somebody like me in the world. There's somebody else like me. And she looked at that paper, she looked at me, and she broke down crying. I didn't realize at the time, I thought I'd really hurt her feelings. But I think she was just feeling what I was going to have to experience in the world based upon what I was. So, I mean, let me just say this. I had a great mom, and no, she wasn't gay, as far as I can tell. You know, but she made it okay to be a gay person, and she could understand how cool they were, how much fun they were, and how much she loved them. She loved the band. They loved her. They used to call her Auntie Mame because my mom got to be a somewhat flamboyant person after my father died. So, but anyways, let me just say that liberation, watching my mom go through that, made it more permissible for me to be as different as I really am.
Love that. Thank you. Go ahead, Bamby.
Can I just add, I think also, you know, when the gay liberation movement started, I think many young people at that time didn't necessarily have those role models, but also, like, you know, from the 60s to the 80s, right, or the late 60s to the 80s or late 70s, it was that, but then, you know, the AIDS epidemic started, right? And so everything that people would see in, you know, the newspapers or whatever was people dying of our community. And so who wanted to see that as like, I don't want to be that, right? And so I think in the movement there have been different iterations, right? And I think right now we're seeing one of those iterations as well.
Thank you. I want to take a pause because I want to make sure we have plenty of time for questions that you all may have and/or the questions you may have for each other. So, anybody at this moment, anything percolating, bubbling that you'd like to ask? Yeah, go ahead. Can you just speak up? There is a mic up here, but yeah.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I was so thrilled on this panel today. Really appreciate your time. I'm wondering, at what point in your life do you feel like, because Mina, you talked about survival earlier, at what point in your life, or was there a certain event that was a catalyst to you transitioning from survival to thriving as a queer person? And what does that look like for you?
This is what it looks like. And that would be 2017 or 18. And that had to do with, it's in my Outwords interview, but it's a theater piece that I did that was about a correspondence between Mackenzie Wark and Kathy Acker. And the performers in that piece had to deal with their personal relationships to gender expression. And that was when I started just realizing how I put all of that in my work my whole life and not so much in my day-to-day life. I kind of had an outlet, and I realized it has to be not just on a stage. I am on the stage again here, but this is also just sitting here among people, you know? So I think that sense of thriving you mean, it's probably the last 7 years.
You want to go? Because I'm trying to think of.
I was 60 years old when I came out. I was half dead. I mean, I felt like I had very little to lose at that age for a lot of reasons. But I will say this, that was the point at which I felt I could thrive. I mean, when I was coming up as a young public defender, I definitely remember representing young trans kids, 13, 14 years old, kicked out of their house because they didn't like the way they dressed. And working in the juvenile court, I don't know how many people work there, but one of the things you try to do is you try to do reunification with the family, a child that's sort of left the family, and I couldn't get them back home. I remember that was the thing that struck me. They're 13 years old, 12 years old, and their courage struck me. The fact that they were willing to walk out of the house and absolutely assert their authenticity rather than subject themselves to somebody else's norms and fashion ideas. But the main thing was this. They didn't live very long, and part of it was that I followed some of them, and none of them made it to 30, I know. But the main thing was this. You try to get them back home, but the parents and the brothers are saying to me, you can't bring them back home because they're going to kill him. And they have promised they're going to hurt him, they're going to damage him, and that if he tries to come back home in that dress, we can't take him in. I love my child, but I can't subject them to that kind of danger, so they can't come home. And one of the things about not having a home, you end up on the streets, you end up in a different kind of culture, and they just don't last very long. And you're exploited. When you're 12 or 13 years old, there's people that will use you. They'll have you sell their drugs, they'll have you steal things, they'll have you sell your body, but they will use you to survive, and they will exploit you. And that life is really hard for these young people, and they don't last very long. Let me just say that. So that was one of the first things I saw. I realized that my goal as a lawyer, as a juvenile lawyer, was to somehow fight against something that was bigger than their family. And that was something that was the overlay, that was this religious or whatever cultural overlay that was killing their kids. And it would never going to be something I was going to be able to sit well with.
Hello, thriving. You fell in love, got married.
Oh.
Let's just skip that part.
Thank you.
Fell in love, got married, and had to deal with cats. So let me just say this. It's not all sweetness and light. I'm telling you right now, they are a complete burden. Cats are the gangsters of the pet world. I just want to let you know. And we are ultimately their slaves. Let me just tell you that. And that's what they presume at the beginning.
I just want to say thank you, Benny and Cam. Just now, I was watching you before in the first session, and what you guys do is like the best performance. It was a lot of time I was watching you rather than watching who was sitting here, because it was so exciting to me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, both of you. So I guess the question is, what was the turning point from surviving to thriving? So, like when there were so many different things that happened, right? Like prison, drug addiction, all of the things, violence in many different ways. Surviving that, right? But then also like getting into this social justice work, right? It really is hard work. It's not well paid. I can honestly tell you that. So I guess for me, the thriving question is more of feeling good with myself, right? Feeling good in my body, feeling good in my interactions with others, and feeling good with just the universe itself, right? I think it's hard for me to see, to even recognize personally, right? I know what that means, thriving, but personally, it's hard to get a real concept of that, right? Because I know that I am an accomplished person, right? Because I've done a lot of stuff, and I've been recognized in different ways, but I don't, I don't think of that, right? The fact that we have, become the biggest translate organization in the United States, for instance, right? And, people ask me, like, what does that feel like? And I'm like, well, it's the same, right? But it's a big deal, right? And it's, so I guess for me, it's hard to say, like, oh, I'm thriving now, right? Because they are things to me that are valuable, like my interactions with people and things like that, and I guess materialistic things. And I don't know if that's what thriving means to other people, but it may be. I don't know.
I just want to say there's a whole lot of people thriving because of Bamby Salcedo and because of the TransLatin coalition. So she may not have seen it herself, but I'm out in the community all the time, and I know the people that are helped, who are thriving, who are surviving because of Bamby Salcedo and TransLatin coalition. So maybe you're hesitating about that, but I have seen the fruits of her labor and all of her work, and there are people thriving out there in the community because of that organization. So let me just say that.
Your wife made me realize I should add, because I was answering that specifically about as a queer person, but I've been married for 30-something years, and that growing process has been a process of thriving, and my husband's going to watch this at some point, so thank you, honey. And as an artist, that's also been a progressive thriving process, but, as I still say, as a queer person, 7 years, and I was wrong, it's actually 6. It was 2018. Sarah Lyons, when you watch this.
Oh, I thought Nick was sitting. Oh, there's Nick. Hey, what's our timetable, just so I can gauge? One more question. Okay. So I have one more question for you all. This is, well, shifting our focus onto the future, including, of course, young and not yet born queer and trans folks. Setting aside any humility that you might carry, and you all are incredibly humble people, what do you feel like you personally, and the way I envision this question is, if you had a beautiful wooden box and your unique gift to future generations was inside that box, and you were going to hand that box to a not yet born queer or trans person, what would be inside your box?
So basically, what is a gift to the city?
Yeah, what's your unique gift? Yes. I know it puts you on the spot, but you can shine anyway.
The first thing that came to my mind was, I'll put in the box, feel the fear, do it anyway.
Fair enough.
I'm going to give an easy answer, and maybe a harder answer will come in a few minutes, but I happen to have that box. And I take it out of my closet every day, and it's full of jewelry and makeup. So, and like a lot of really nice silver items. This is not plastic. So I would probably leave that box with jewels and with makeup for someone who thinks they're a boy.
My gift. I think it's hard to just paint it as one gift. I think, if I had this box or a magic wand or whatever it is, I would, my gift would be for, to have the ability to open people's minds and hearts and understand that, that we all have the human experience, right? That we're all part of the human experience, and that we all should see each other eye to eye and support each other in the best possible way. And I would say, that I would also, eliminate all oppression and discrimination and, racism and everything that really, embruja la gente. I don't know how to say that, but yeah. All of that. So that's your homework.
More serious answer. I would have in that box, however that works in that future technology, there'd be a link to the Outwords archive. And there would be also a copy, somehow, however it is, of the film Word Is Out from the 70s, which was the precursor to the Outwords archive, a documentary about queer lives that was made in the early 70s that really influenced me when I saw it in a movie theater.
Go ahead, Bamby.
No.
Oh,
I'm just gonna put it
okay. Well, Paul, that's very kind of you and very generous, and that is, in fact, how we envision Outwords. I also want to introduce Jack McCarthy, our incredible communications director, right here. So pivotal to everything we do. We have a small team of about 7 people, and the mission from the outset has been, how do we make sure, in fact, one of our interviewees who has since passed away, when he was talking about why it was important to him to share his story, his name was Blackberry. He was an amazing singer-songwriter up in Oakland, and he said, this story, it's going to live in various locations. That's very important. Redundancy on different kinds of technology, hard drives, in the cloud, et cetera. And hopefully these interviews will exist for centuries and in some way, shape, or form serve as a roadmap for future generations of queer and trans youth, and not only queer and trans youth, but all youth, all of our allies, all of our unyet born allies who are going to be fighting one fight or another until humanity finally kisses us all a warm goodbye, whether it's saving our planet or any other cause. And I personally believe that the wisdom and the experience created within the queer elders that we've interviewed is a roadmap for anybody who wants to make enduring change in the world. So I want to say thank you again to Mia, Bamby, and Paul for sharing so generously with us today. Thank you to Nick. Nick moved again. There he is. There they are. And for organizing this incredible, incredible symposium summit, and to everybody here also who helped produce it. Thank you all for your hard work. Thanks to Angel City for being here today as well. I'm very excited and inspired. And thanks again for being here.